Hello, my name is Dr. Marin Bozic. I'm assistant professor in the Department of Applied Economics at the University of Minnesota and one of the co-creators of Dairy Revenue Protection. Today, over the next 10-15 minutes, I would like to present to you the Excel DRP analyzer that I've created to help to explain this program, to help you run the what-if analysis, what happens with my indemnities if the price of cheese goes down by so much, or the price of dry whey declines, or the yield forecasts are wrong, etc. And also to show approximately how the Dairy Revenue Protection Program would have performed over the last 10 years, since October 2008 through October 2018. So without further ado, let's take a look at this Excel calculator. All the cells in the calculator are colored either blue, gold or yellow, and green. The blue cells are those that you control. You can declare what your state is, which quarters you want to protect, butterfat, protein, class price weighting factor, coverage level percent, declared covered milk production, and then protection factor and declared share. When we start talking about the scenario analysis, you will also be able to control the blue cells in the what-if analysis part of the calculator. You will be able to set the final actual cheese prices at a level that are, or butter and the dry whey prices, at a level that are different than the current futures prices. So I'm recording this on the afternoon of November 19th. Milk production report came out today, so there are no new rates released today. So the latest premiums as of right now are those for Friday, November 16th, and you can see that here in the calculator. Let's enter some data, see where it takes us. Let's enter the data, for example, for Minnesota, the state where I reside in. Not Mississippi, Minnesota. Second quarter of 2019. Let's choose 425 butterfat, 325 protein. Declared class price weighting factor of 1.0 means that the entire weight is on class 3. Now, you can either choose the policy with components, or you can choose the policy or endorsement with class 3 and 4. Those are two separate endorsements. But what we're going to do here, we're going to compare them side by side. That's why I'm asking you to declare both your component as well as the weighting factor on class 3 and 4. So we can do side-by-side comparison of these two alternative approaches. Coverage level, we're going to leave at 95%. I'm going to choose 2.5 million pounds per quarter. Protected factor and declared share, we're going to leave that at 1 for now. And don't worry about them for now. Okay, when you click this button here, get latest data from UDM Direct, what Excel will do, it will go online and grab the most recent data from the University of Minnesota cloud platform that this file is linked into. So on a daily basis, you'll be able to download the latest premiums from our cloud. And let's take a look at some numbers. Expected revenue, 453,000 under components policy, 392,000 under class 3 policy. Revenue guarantee is the expected revenue times the coverage level percent. So we take the expected revenue, multiply in this case by 95% to get the revenue guarantee. To get the revenue guarantee per hundredweight, we divide this dollar amount by the declared milk production expressed in hundredweights. Premium before subsidy is listed also. Premium before subsidy per hundredweight. And then because this is a federally mandated program, crop insurance program, federal government pays for part of your premium through subsidies. In particular, for 95% coverage level, they will pay for 44% of the total premium amount. In this case, the subsidy will be $3,156 for the components-based endorsement, or $2,407 for the class pricing option. The amount that you, producers, have to pay if you choose to buy this policy will be $4,000 and $4,016 under the components, or $3,063 under class 3. As you can see from the components we have declared, this milk is a little bit richer than the standard class 3 milk, which is 3.5 butterfat, 2.99 protein. So it is only fair that protecting those higher components would cost a little bit more as well. One interesting facet should probably be the probability of positive indemnity. These are not historical probabilities. These are forward-looking probabilities. What we do here is we use the actuarial documents provided to the public by the risk management agency to analyze how often, in all the possible states of the world that could happen, how often would this particular policy result in any indemnities. And what we find is that in 30% of all scenarios analyzed over the second quarter of 2019, in 30% of all scenarios, there are some positive indemnities under this set of producer choices. Probability of positive net benefit is the probability that indemnity will be received and it will be higher than the premiums that you have paid. So in this case, the probability that indemnity is going to be received and will be higher than $4,016. Before we proceed, I want to draw your attention to these probabilities as we change the coverage level from 95% to 90% and then 85%. So we are currently at 30 and 29% virtually indistinguishable. Now let's change this to 90%. Probabilities fall to 12% or 11. And then if you change to 85%, they fall down further to 4%. 4% means that only 4 quarters out of 100 or 4 months out of 100 months would pay out. That is very, very seldom. It could be over 10 years that you would have 1 quarter paying out or a few quarters paying out. So that is not a mistake. If you choose coverage level 85%, you're choosing to protect yourself against catastrophic risks only that occur maybe once every 10 or 15 years. So just be aware that if you're choosing a policy with a lower coverage level percent, there will be more quarters with 0 indemnities. That does not mean that the program is improperly rated or that you're doing something wrong. That just means that the kind of risk that you've chosen to protect against are only catastrophic risks. Okay, let's play with the what-if analysis module. What we have here, golden colored, are the latest futures prices as of Friday, November 16th. These were the futures prices on Friday, November 16th. If you use this calculator later and if you click on the Get Latest Data from UDM Direct, these numbers will always reflect the futures prices used to price the product, the priced DRP on that particular sales effective date. Now, what is really interesting about a what-if analysis is that you could say, well, what if you're telling me that right now cheese is forecasted to be $1.61, $1.64 for April through June 2019. What if we are wrong? What if it ends up being $1.51, $1.54? Let's make sure that we reset the coverage level to 95%. And let's take a look at, we'll reset the analysis. And then let's start playing with numbers. If cheese is $1.50 in all 3 months, what happens? We will receive an indemnity. We will receive an indemnity of 44 cents under components policy, 41 cents under class 3 policy, class 3-4 policy. In this case, it really is class 3 because we declared 100% weighting factor on class 3. Why did I want to bring this to your attention? Because our revenue guarantee was $3 apart. The revenue guarantee under components policy was $17.22 per hundredweight. Class 3 was $14.90 per hundredweight. That does not mean that there is some price out there that has to fall $3 more before the class 3 price pays out. In this case, I've dropped the price of cheese by 10 cents, and you can see that we are getting very similar indemnities under both of these alternative endorsements, alternative contracts here. So be careful that you don't end up comparing apples and oranges if you're considering class policy versus components policy. Where components policy really is useful is protecting against protein and butterfat declines. So if I make butter fall by 15 cents in addition to maybe cheese dropping 15 cents. So what you see is that the class policy will pay 96 cents, but you will get, what is this? An almost 16 cents more per hundredweight, or $4,000, $5,000, $4,000 more under components policy. Why? Because if you do actually protect higher protein, higher butterfat, as prices of those components decline, your indemnity rises at a faster rate, as it should, because probably your milk check is also falling at a faster pace than the class price as well. You don't like this scenario? You'd like to try a different scenario? No problem. Click Reset What If Analysis, this button here. Everything goes back to the expected and you can start fresh. This time let's try a scenario where driveway drops by 10 cents but nothing else falls. And we see that in this case it's actually not enough to trigger indemnity. Driveway dropping by 10 cents will not suffice to trigger the indemnities. What if cheese drops another 5 cents on top of that? 5, 6 cents. Now we are getting some indemnities. The other thing that you could actually learn from this what if analysis module is how does the price of cheese affect the protein? How does the price of butter affect the butterfat and protein? So you could look. Let's reset it one more time. So for example, here the protein price is currently $1.93 per pound. Now if we drop the cheese by 10 cents, instead of $1.93, protein is down to $1.59. So we drop the price of protein by about 34 cents. 34 cents by dropping the price of cheese by 10 cents. So you can see, you can start getting a sense, you can start building your intuition on how big a change in the cheese price has to be before protein price drops to a certain level. Same for butter and butterfat, dry whey, and other solids as well. Another important facet, of course, is to understand how do yield shocks affect your indemnity. So right now we are forecasting, RMA is forecasting the second quarter of 2019 in Minnesota to be 5,670, the yield, milk production per cow. What if they're wrong? What if we are wrong? And yield ends up being lower. So right now we have an indemnity of 19 cents per hundredweight under this scenario that we've created. Let's drop the yield by 50 pounds, see what happens. 5,620. And now instead of 19 cents per hundredweight, we are looking at 34 cents per hundredweight. And what happens if the yield was 50 cents above what was forecasted? 5,720. Now instead of 19, we are only getting 4 cents. So this is a revenue protection. Revenue is price times quantity. If the state of Minnesota was more productive per cow, we are assuming that your cows were also more productive than you originally anticipated, and therefore your revenue did not decline as much as the prices declined in this scenario. So you can see here how our indemnity is affected by the changes in yield. Yield forecasts are designed to be unbiased, which means that they are never right, but they are they're not wrong consistently in one direction or another direction. On average, they are right. They're never right, but on average, they're right. Okay, so let's take a look at historical analysis. And before we do that, we need to introduce the concept of hedging horizon. So what we want to do is we want to say, well, how would this program have performed if we were doing what we are planning to do here for second quarter of 2019 if we were doing it consistently over the last 10 years. Okay, how do you model that? Well, what I'm going to assume is that if you're right now covering second quarter of 2019, that's as if you were always covering the quarter that is 5 months out. 5 months out. And I'm going to go to this second tab, historical payments and basis. Now there is no tab about basis here. There are some hidden columns here. It's more advanced, so I hid it for now. We can certainly cover that if anybody will have a desire to. Okay, so there are 4 blocks here. Expected prices, guaranteed revenue per hundredweight, actual prices, actual revenue per hundredweight, and then indemnity per hundredweight. Now, I'm using several big assumptions here, so we have to be transparent with them. First, I'm assuming that yield shocks are 0. I'm assuming that the expected and actual yields exactly overlap. That is not a correct assumption, but that is the best we can do because we don't know what RMA would have published for expected yields over the previous 10 years. So, we will either have to wait 10 more years and then see how DRP performed, throughout 2020s, or we can say, well, let's do the best we can. Look at the last 10 years. Maybe we don't know what the yields would have done, but we know what the prices did. That's my first big assumption. The second assumption is regarding cheese futures for the period 2008 through 2010. Cheese futures did not trade. They did not exist before July, I believe, 2010. But there is a non-arbitrage, what in finance is called non-arbitrage relationship between class 3, butter, dry whey, and cheese. There is an equation that ties them together with certainty. So what we can do is we can use the futures prices for all of these other commodities to figure out what cheese futures would have been if they had existed between 2007, 2008, and 2010. So that's why I'm able to offer expected prices for protein, even for months that precede the introduction of cheese futures. Okay, so let's see how these trading programs would have performed over the last 10 years. We have 10 years, 4 quarters a year. That's 40 quarters. You can see that here, 40 quarters. Each of these policies, either of these policies, contracts, endorsements, either of these endorsements would have paid out in 15 out of 40 quarters. So roughly a third, maybe a little bit over a third. Very similar to those probabilities that I've presented to you on the other tab at the beginning of this video. The premium paid, as we have seen on the previous tab, was 16 cents for components or 12 cents per hundredweight for class pricing option. That is listed here. Now the average payment is a simple average of all the payments received over all of these 40 quarters. Many of them will be zeros, others will be pretty high. So let's take a look. Okay, so what this is saying is that October, November, December 2008, components-based policy would pay $3.34 in gross indemnities. Class price option $3.15, pretty decent. $7.35, that's a lot of money. In first quarter of 2009, and class price $6.51, that's very decent protection. Let's see more recent years. So last 4 years have been really terrible in terms of prices. Would have DRP helped? Okay, let's take a look. In 2016, the first quarter would have paid out $1.80. But then we would have, from second quarter of 2016, if I'm looking this correct, no, I'm sorry. The first 2 quarters of 2016 would have paid out. The last quarter of 2015 and the first 2 quarters of 2016 would have paid out $1.10, $64, and $1.80. Or here $1.43, $77, and $1.78. So 9 months in a row you would have a fairly decent gross indemnity. But then there will be no indemnities paid from July 2016 through July 2017. So about a full year, 12 months, 4 quarters of no payments. Then another quarter, 48 cents then another quarter of zeros. Then the first quarter of this year, we would have $2 paid for components, $1.96 for price. Why is this important? For several reasons. First, there will be quarters, consecutive quarters, with zero indemnities. That doesn't mean that the program is mispriced. It's an insurance. It pays about 1 in 3 times. It's not an insurance that pays every time. It's a proper crop insurance program. The second point I want to raise is that remember these numbers. Net benefit, the average payment 69 cents for components, 64 cents for class pricing option. That is 5 months out. 5 months out. Now let's do the same program, but this time instead of covering the second quarter of 2019, I'm going to cover the last quarter of 2019. That's going to give me the hedging horizon of 11 months, not 5 months. Before we do that, remember these numbers again. Average payment 69 and 64 cents. Now let me change this. Get latest data. Premium's a little bit higher. But let's go back. Now instead of 69 and 64 cents, we are at 90 and 86 cents. So the average payment actually went up by 30 cents. The payments over the last few years are also more abundant. Now you can see that this year, in 2018, we will have $2.31 paid for the first quarter, $1.02 for the third quarter, 52 cents for the second quarter, and very similar under the class policy. Before that, there would be about, what is this? Year and a half of no payments. Before that, again, there would be a year and a half of positive payments. 66 cents, 89, 87, $1.79, 282. So it would have been decent help. But one thing that DRP cannot protect you against are predictable low prices. DRP will protect you against price shocks, which means prices declining when the market did not expect those drops. DRP will not protect you against low prices that everybody saw coming. That's not a shock. That's just a market consensus. That also means that hedging further out will almost always, no, I cannot guarantee you personally, but all my research shows that hedging far out will get you something similar to historical average margins. Nobody has a clue what's going to happen in the fourth quarter of 2019. Nobody has a clue what's going to happen in the first quarter of 2020, in a few days when we start hopefully seeing some activity there. That's a year out. And if you don't have a clue if we are going to see a surge in import demand from China because trade wars are resolved, or we will see another recession because government is over, in too much debt. If you don't know which world we are going to live in, then the prices that you can lock in are average. They are not too high, they are not too low, but remember, you keep all the upside. This is not futures where you lock in the price. You just remove the downside. So, another thing I want to show you here. Net benefit here is 67 cents. The maximum payment received was actually $8.39 in the second quarter of 2009. Now, this trading program assumes a dairyman that is very disciplined and always hedges 11 months out. Right now, this dairyman has purchased the coverage for the last quarter of 2019. What if we had a disciplined dairyman who regularly hedged over the last 10 years using their ERP if their ERP had existed, but they wanted to just go 2 months out. Instead of 11 months out, let's go 2 months out. So here the net benefit is 67 cents, which means that over the last 10 years, the dairyman using 11 months out returned all of the premiums paid, came back to him in form of, or her in form of indemnities, and then on top of that, they collected 67 cents per hundredweight protected. If instead of going 11 months out, if we go 2 months out, so that's right now January, March 2019, let's calculate the premiums. Premiums are much smaller. Instead of 20 cents, you pay 5 or 6 cents. But then take a look historically. Before, we had net benefit of 60 to 70 cents over the last 10 years. Here, it's only 20 cents. Before, there was actually a quarter in 2009 where your indemnities would be over $8. Here, there were absolutely no quarters with indemnities higher than even $4, $3.81. Before, I showed you that all quarters in 2018 would have received, I think 2 out of 3 quarters in 2018 would have received $1 or more in indemnities. If you go only 2 months out, you get 37 cents in the first quarter, 91 cents in the third quarter of 2018. You get some payments also in 2017, 4 cents, 67 cents, and then a bunch of zeros here as well. Again, the same message as before. If you really want to have a risk management program that is effective, that really covers, offers substantive protection against crises that are deep and prolonged, the only way to do that is to hedge distant months. Hedging 2 or 3 months out is not going to help you much there. What we are seeing right now, based on the data that RMA shared with us, is that over 60% of all endorsements that were actually sold are for second quarter of 2019 or later. So a minority of people are hedging this front month, and I'm very pleased with that result. I hope that over time we will see more and more interest in hedging those distant months. That was one of my big reasons for getting involved with this project in the first place. Okay, so that is the DRP analyzer. This file will be made available to the extension educators and also crop insurance agents for that work for insurance agencies that have actually subscribed to University of Minnesota Dairy Data Services that we call UDM Direct. So if you would like to have this calculator, talk to your crop insurance agent, ask them to write to me, and we can set them up with our service, and then they will be able to share this file with you, and there's absolutely no cost to you once we set up your crop insurance agent, to you as producer, I mean. So I hope this video was useful. Send me a direct message on Twitter. My handle is at @marinbozic. If you have any questions, we can talk over Twitter. You can send me an email. My email address is mbozic@umn.edu. Thank you very much.